Welcome to my podcast. Today's dream, tomorrow's reality. My name is Vicki Poole. I'm a life coach, health coach, and hypnotist at the Enlightened Peach. And this podcast is all about embracing our mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life? Well, it's recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I will be your host, and I will have special guests from time to time. And as a matter of fact, I have a guest for you today that I'm super excited to introduce you to. But if you have any ahas or questions, please leave a comment in a voice message. So now let's get started. So all of a sudden I realized I got different windows and stuff open. I had to get rid of it, talk about unedited and raw. And this wonderful lady right here is Lorna Vaughn. And I just wanted to tell you, I've been following her for a very long time on Facebook. And she really intrigued me. Gosh, I don't even remember when I first started seeing you, but you had the longer hair and you wore the hat and you had this wonderful, amazing jewelry. And I was always fascinated with this jewelry that you were wearing. And your message was just so good. And you had such an amazing following. And I will tell you, one of the things that always amazed me when you would do a live, it wasn't even, I don't even know that they were all scheduled. It seemed like they were impromptu lives, and you would have so many people on there interacting and just really, really soaking in your message. And I was one of them. I would pop on every time I saw that you were live. And then at some point it seemed like you were kind of going a little dark, and I started feeling a little uncomfortable. And that just doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. And so I just kind of walked away. And so I didn't see you for quite a while. And then all of a sudden you popped back in and you were short hair, all new. And I think you got married in the meantime. And I mean, you had a very different message about you. And it seemed like you probably lost some followers, not a clue, but it seems like when you get on there live now, it's still the same experience that you just suddenly people are popping in, and it's an amazing thing to me at the draw and pull that you have with people. So I just wanted to let our listeners know how I know of you, and that I reached out to you because things have changed so much for you that it's really cool to me, because anytime you can see someone who is at the top of their game, they're doing amazing, and then they have a change of heart. And yours is a big one with religion and things, but there are a lot of people that have just a change of heart, that they're going to change their niche, I guess is what you'd say, and they can't walk away and switch to a niche that they would be more suited to. So it's fascinating to me that you were able to say, this is what I'm going to do, and you just like, and there you are. So just go ahead, if you don't mind, just share a little bit about your journey and how you got started. And I mean, it's got to be fascinating. I don't know your full story. I just know you from seeing you on there. I mean, I remember hearing you talking about certain things when you were on your lives, but just go ahead and share that if you don't mind.
Well, it's hard to really know where to start. Okay. I had a career in corporate America for 15 years or so. And I rose to the top of that world, and I was most of the time in sales and marketing, but I sat on boards of some companies and I worked for some CEOs, and it was always in the place of helping entrepreneurs break through their revenue ceilings and helping them with their messaging and all that. But I was totally miserable, totally and completely miserable. And I remember waking up one morning and I was in this beautiful, 3-story, $500,000 condo. And I had my Lexus downstairs and I had my fur coats and I had this big title. And all I could think is, there's some Starbucks barista downtown Chicago, which is where I'm from, where this is her perfect life. This is her dream life. This is what she wants more than anything, but it's not mine. And I just want to die. And, a lot of people from that world talk about golden handcuffs. It was just, I couldn't leave. The money had me, the fame, all this stuff. So I had to get kicked out. God had to kick me out 3 times because I'm stubborn. So I got fired the first time. It was actually my family business that I helped build. And my mom eventually said, you got to get out of here, because I was miserable. And I was losing my soul. I was miserable. And I went through, years of what I call the dark night of the soul. Years. 4 horrible years. I had a couple nervous breakdowns. I became suicidal. It was bad. And eventually I kind of tried to get back into the corporate world and kind of recreate my life back there. But God was like, I don't think you understand that when I kick you out, you're not coming back in. So I managed to get in for a minute, but I just couldn't make it work anymore. I literally couldn't make it work. And it was kind of terrifying because I didn't know what else to do. And I had worked myself up to a point where I couldn't get a lower level, quote unquote, job.
You got too much.
I'm overqualified.
Yeah.
So I was stuck. And last thing that happened is I got a job and I was fired after 10 weeks over the phone by the CEO. And I plunged into a very serious other, depression. And I think this is what happens for a lot of people who reject their calling. The way I would say it now is, if you do not listen to God's voice and he has a purpose for you, you are not going to be a happy person.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to be happy.
Yes.
You might be rich, but you're not going to be happy.
Well, not just really quick. I heard somebody talking the other day, and one of the things that he said was that, that a lot of times God puts you in situations to be miserable so that you can grow through the process. And he said one of the worst mistakes that a lot of people make is they get in this hole and everything, they start praying, God, get me out of this hole. And God says, I just put you in that hole so you'd learn how to get out of the damn hole. So get out of the hole. So, I thought that was just really, really good. Pardon?
Yeah, it reminds me of I was reading in First Kings today about this prophet who goes to one of the kings of, I think it's Israel, who had really been angering God, and he had a very unpleasant, unwelcome message to bring to this king from God. And God said, don't go back the way you came. Go a different way home. And it's kind of the same thing. However, we got into the hole, we have to get out a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, thought to myself, I know that I'm supposed to do some kind of spiritual transformational work with people. And so I also had done a lot of study of Carl Jung, and I knew that this was some kind of breakthrough that was trying to happen. And when a breakthrough doesn't happen, it looks like a breakdown.
Right.
And so I decided, even though, my parents were very seriously concerned, and they should have been. I was suicidal, because by this time I was 43, 4 or something. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, because at that age, you think that you'll be where you're going to be, whether it's the white picket fence and the marriage and the kids or whatever the dream is. That's when you assume you're there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting diagnosed with the couple. I ended up getting diagnosed with bipolar and PTSD, and this woman wanted to put me on medication, and I said, I am not doing that, because I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is I'm not listening. At the time, I probably would have said God, but the deeper I got into New Age, the word God left. I didn't like that word anymore. But at the time, I probably would have said, I'm not listening. I'm not listening to God. That's why this is happening. If I listen to him, I don't need the pills. I am not advocating that for everybody. I just knew in my heart that was true for me. So I decided that I was just going to do the thing and just start my business. And and I did. And I kind of burst onto the scene from nowhere. I mean, I didn't have a bit, I had a short little flare of a business several years before on Facebook during those 4 years of, the dark night of the soul. But no one knew me. I hadn't been on Facebook for 18 months. I'd never run an online business before. And I burst onto the scene. And my message was kind of like, look, if you're a maverick, if you're a disruptor, if you have an uncomfortable message to bring to the world, you got to have the courage to say the thing and do the thing and trust that, your calling is going to protect you. And stepping into your calling is not going to be the problem. It's not stepping into your calling. That's the problem.
Right.
And I kind of taught people how to sell and market. Now, this is where, I would not use these words anymore, but I taught them to sell and market using their own energy. I started to teach what I called alchemy, energy alchemy. That was my biggest group. I had 4,200 people in there. After about a year and a half, I built $1 million business in 10 months, working maybe 20 hours a week. And I began to really be seen as an influencer and a trendsetter, and people called me a spiritual guru and all kinds of things that went to my head and made me think that I had something really special to say. And when it got dark was about a little less than a year and a half in to that. And I started, I was always doing my business coaching and my sales and marketing coaching, but I started to get more into kind of consciousness and channeling, because I was, those live streams, part of the reason why they were so magnetic is because I was channeling, and I was channeling some pretty, powerful, but I would not say light beings. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't understand or believe what I do now, which is that if I'm not under the protection of Christ, something can look like a high level, high being of light, and it is not. And I was playing with fire, is how I see it now. And I didn't know it at the time, because Satan doesn't look like the dark. He's not going to look scary at the beginning. That's a stupid strategy.
Yeah.
He's going to appear. He's going to appear like light. There's a verse in, I think it's 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 11:14, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So I'm in New Age, and I don't know that verse in the Bible, even though I was raised Christian. My dad's a priest. I got missionaries and pastors all throughout my lineage on both sides. I just didn't know that I was playing with fire. And I think a lot of people don't know that. And so but they don't tend to go as dark as I did. And I think the reason I ended up going as dark as I did is because I just have that side to me. I just have that, I remember I was in therapy when I was in high school, and why my therapist broke confidentiality and talked to my mom, I don't know. But my mom said to me later that my therapist said to my mom, Lorna will go right up to the edge, but she won't go over. And I'm telling you, that woman, she was right. I will go right to the edge, because I just have to see what everybody's so scared of. I've got to see what is so scary, and who's telling me it's scary anyway, and what do they know?
Who is this they?
Who's this they? Exactly. And I found out. And you're right, it got very dark. And the funny thing is, though, the ironic thing is, though, even at the beginning when it felt light, it wasn't. It was dark at the beginning. It just doesn't appear that way at the beginning. That's not the way it works at all.
You were, even if I'm remembering right, when you were getting into the darker place, you were almost looked like you were kind of beginning to have a costume feel about you? Something.
It was very caricaturized. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
there was definitely a kind of a, yeah, I'm not really sure what you would call it, but yeah, I
It was
wouldn't
almost,
have,
it almost had to feel like you were a person in a play or
yeah,
something, and you were putting
yeah,
on this costume, but it wasn't, I don't know if it was the words you were saying, because I don't remember those, but I remember the energetic feel that was
yeah,
coming off of you was feeling like, I
yeah.
think this isn't for me. And that's when I walked away. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I started saying dark is the newest, lightest light.
Mm.
And dark consciousness, which is a big thing now. I mean, it's all over the place. People were not talking about the dark. They were not talking about dark consciousness anywhere online before I started talking about it. And now it's the big thing. I mean, it's everywhere. All brands are going dark. Everybody's talking about it. And I regret that, and I have repented for that. And I have asked for forgiveness because I created a huge movement that Satan is just very happy about.
Yeah.
And,
But, when you think about it, though, don't you think that everything that happens to us has its place? And so maybe you were put into that place to catapult you into the likeness that you're in now. And maybe everybody that is following in those footsteps and stuff, that's their journey to figure out where they need to go from there.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, and also it doesn't mean that it wasn't sinful and that I shouldn't repent for it.
True.
It reminds me of one of the stories in the Old Testament I was reading a while ago where God is speaking to a king, and I can't remember his name, but he is not an Israelite king. He's a king of another nation, and the Israelites have sinned against God again. They've disobeyed him. They've done something he said they shouldn't do, just they were constantly doing. And he was going to punish them because that's what he told them. If you obey me, I will reward you. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. You're not going to like it. So he says to this king, woe to you, king, whatever his name is, you are the rod of my wrath. And he goes on to say that he's going to use this king to rout the Israelites and to kill the Israelites. And then he's going to punish the king for doing it. And I remember reading that early on after I converted, and my Aunt Kathy, who's been a believer forever and ever, she's in her 70s. She's been my mentor, kind of helping me deprogram from New Age and kind of understand what the word says and what the Bible means and what God really is telling us. And I said, I'm sorry, but I need an explanation for why. Because this feels very wrong. And she said to me, God will never turn someone's heart to evil that isn't totally happy to do the evil. But the fact is, it's evil. And if your heart is willing to do it, you've sinned and you need to repent. And if you don't, there's consequences. Yeah. And I thought, wow, like amazing. Okay, I totally get it. And so that's what I would say is like, yes, it's all a part of my life. It's all a part of my journey. And also it was wrong. And my pride and my ego were, and also yet my sincerity. I mean, I really did think that I was doing good. I did not think that I was channeling anything negative at all. Not a bone in my body ever thought that. And so, my heart was in the right place, but it was still sorely deceived. And I deceived and I misled a lot of people. And so to me, it's either or. I can't change the past. And I wouldn't be where I am if I had lived a different life. And at the same time, it was wrong. And it misled a lot of people. And also at the same time, they have free will and they could have used the discernment that it sounds like you used.
Mhm.
So, I think it's nuanced. I think it's yes and no. It's both and,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah.
I feel like, we, like you said, we all have free will. And I think that if you're paying attention, you can feel when things are not right, and you can make a decision not to do something, or not to listen anymore, turn off the channel, keep going. But there's a lot of people that kind of feel that and say, well, I still want to hear, I still want
Yeah.
to, and like I said, I don't even remember the words that you said. I don't know if it was the words that you were saying that bothered me the most, or just the energy, the costumes, the energy. It felt very cinematic, and
Mhm.
almost like in some of these old movies where they're doing the sacrifices and they're doing all these different things. It had that cinematic feel to it to me. And so, but like you said, everybody has free will. And so if that was the message that they wanted to hear, they would have kept looking around to find it,
And they
right?
have, and they
Yeah.
have,
Yeah. Yeah.
they've begged me, many people, when I finally came back and said that I'm born again. And I, people were like, I mean, I had so many people say, now I know miracles are real. Because the likelihood
So
is just,
when did you meet your husband?
I met him in June of 2020, right after I moved, basically the week I moved here to Tucson from
Okay.
Chicago. And he literally showed up at my door, literally knocked at my door. And he was my assistant. I told my assistant I bought a home and I need help with all the stuff. Like help hanging all the paintings and the curtains and all of that. And he's in construction, and he had a handyman construction business. And she forgot to tell me that she's found somebody and scheduled him to show up at my house. So I opened the door because I'm like, hi, I have a week. How does anybody know that I'm here?
Yeah.
And I opened the door, and it's one of those, talk about cinematic. It was one of those Hollywood moments where time stopped and we just kind of stared into each other's eyes. Who in the world is this? And I literally forgot my manners. I mean, I forgot to invite him inside. I was like, who is this man? Most beautiful, beautiful man, most gorgeous, piercing blue eyes I have ever seen. Just unbelievable. So anyway, I invited him inside, and I'm like, by the way, why are you here? And he was like, well, you're your assistant and you need help. And I'm like, you're my hand. This is wonderful. I'm going to have to find all kinds of work for you to
The
do.
list just got longer.
So we turns out, after talking for maybe 5 minutes, that he had worked on my parents' home for 2 years. And knew my parents very well, and had gone to dinner with them, coffee with my dad. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Because they had moved to Tucson several years before. So anyway, that's how we met. We started dating in the fall of that year, and we took a break for about 6 months, and then he came back, and in the fall of last year we got married.
Okay.
Wait, no, fall of 21.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the year before. Yeah.
Year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So
and he was a believer.
Uh-huh.
And he was I mean, I just, when I came to Christ, which it's only been 4 months, I had this, I think this happens to a lot of people. Like, they just, especially people who've been really steeped in New Age and gone really deep into it. You just kind of do this life review. Like, whoa. It's kind of like if you're watching a movie and there's a huge plot twist at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go back over the whole movie from the beginning and be like, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, that was happening. No way.
Yeah.
That's
To
kind of
see
what
if
I
you
was
could see it
doing.
coming, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to kind of suddenly realize, wait a minute. And so I did that, and I was like, my Andrew married me while I was saying all this crazy blasphemous stuff all the time, and I was working on a tarot deck, and what? Like, it just blew my mind and I remember him saying very, very early on, I think this is one of our first dates. And he said, I think that God sent me to you to bring you back to him. And I was so annoyed.
I was going to ask, how did you feel about that statement?
I was so annoyed. I was like, oh, really? Well, I think that God sent you to me so that I can bring you to God. Like, I was so indignant. I was just like, you don't even know, so indignant, so arrogant. And he was right. And he was just patient with me. And I don't understand. People don't know my story really, and these probably your listeners and viewers don't. The fact that I accepted Christ as my savior and confess that I'm a sinner and that he is the way and the truth and life. This is not, I cannot, at the time, I could not have imagined a worse spiritual condition than becoming a born again Christian.
Why is that?
Really. Well, because to me at the time it was Neanderthal spirituality, backwards thinking. We've
so
progressed.
Was your experience, because you said you were raised in a Christian home, so was your experience back then as something to get away from? Is that kind of what led you to start feeling that way?
Well, yes and no. I loved going to church. My dad was a priest, an Episcopal priest, for most of my childhood. And my mom's dad was a missionary, actually, way up in the Yukon. They lived literally I say it's like Little House in the Tundra. They lived in a log cabin that he built with his hands. They had no running water and no electricity until she was 16. Wow. And their entire life was devoted to him being a missionary to this tribe of Canadian Indians. I have missionaries and evangelists and priests and pastors on both sides of my family. And I loved going to church, and I loved my dad's sermons, and I loved the hymns. And we chanted a psalm before dinner every night. I loved it. But I will say that I was not able to separate the human Christians that I lived with who had flaws. And, I didn't have an awesome childhood. I had some trauma. And I think that's common in most families. But when you see the disconnect, kind of the public leader and the private person, whether it was my dad or other people in the family who I also saw kind of this, that's not how you actually are, though, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because we're human, we're human and we have problems. And I wasn't able to disconnect the two. And so I walked away from the whole thing because I was like, this is a fraud, basically. And another piece of it was not only that, but it was intellectually, I started to question, really, are we really going to believe this book that was written, a couple hundred years? Most of the books were not even written for 40 years or 50 years after he died. And, and what about all the books that were left out? And what about, all of those kind of intellectualizing of the faith kind of really flooded in. And at the same time that I was starting to question that, so were my parents.
Okay.
So we all kind of walked out of the faith kind of at the same time. And that was basically at the end of high school.
Okay.
And then I spent probably 10 years being a hardcore, like, agnostic. Like, if I can't, I don't know. I can't, to me, atheists were like, really? You know, there's not a God. I mean, come on, I mean, that's a little silly.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one? Can I prove it? No. But can I prove it? No. So I think it's just this way that people appease their sense of unease and fear of living in a scary world. I was just.
And I will say, when you're saying that about the family and how the face they show the world is not the way they are inside the home and everything, and there's a lot of stories about things like that. Some are very extreme. But I will say, I had a real hard time for a very long time because I felt like the most unchristian people I'd met in church.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like, I don't
and
understand.
Kind of vice versa also, right?
Do what?
Well, kind of vice versa.
Yeah.
It seems to me like you can be super happy and it has nothing to do with whether you're Christian, and you can be super miserable and angry and it has nothing to do with whether you're Christian.
Yeah.
So what's the point? I mean, it was all about, what am I getting out of it? Which is just bizarre to me now. Like, it's just, and also just because I did not have a personal relationship with Jesus, it really, I don't think that I know that I didn't. It was more theoretical. I was like a theoretical Christian,
Mm-hmm.
I had to take it on their authority who Jesus was. And if Jesus is the type of person that inspires people to act that way, I'm not interested,
Yeah.
If he's the type of God that allows that type of behavior to just kind of pass from a Christian, but not a non-Christian, I'm not interested. All the issues that people have with Christianity that I totally understand. And so I just walked away, and I did not give it a backward glance, and I stepped into being an agnostic for 10 years. And then I kind of started to open back up to maybe there is something more than just the physical universe. I'd had some weird synchronicities that my super intellectual brain was like, that's weird.
So what kind of synchronicities are you talking about?
Well, I was pregnant at the time, and and my friend was real super woo-woo. I was like, oh my gosh, she's like talking about how she's channeling all these angels, and she went to this energy worker who also happened to be just a straight ahead chiropractor who did prenatal chiropractic work. And I went to this woman for that. I was so not interested in any of her energy stuff. So we did this session, and I'm walking out of her office, and she stops me right at the door, and she says, Lorna, you're really blocked right here. You live only in your head. You don't live in your body, and you really might want to look at that. And I'm like, whatever. I'm 6 months pregnant. I don't know how you think I'm not living in my body.
That's all I'm doing right now.
That's all I'm doing. Of course, she was talking about my chakra. It was blocked and whatever. So the next day, I go to my therapist, who I'd been seeing for years and had never said a single woo-woo thing, because if she had, I probably wouldn't have kept seeing her. And we do our session, and I get up and I'm walking out the door, and she stops me and says, Lorna, I just need to tell you, you're really blocked right here. You live only in your head, not in your body, and you might want to think about it. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? It was one of those like, what just happened? Like, what? I couldn't dismiss it. So I asked her, I said, what do you mean? Like, literally, do you know my chiropractor? Like, have you talked?
Is that your sister, perhaps?
Is it your sister? So then she was talking about chakras, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this stuff is real. This is ridiculous. I don't have chakras, and so that's how I stepped into New Age. And I just did it with one little toe and then another toe, and then as it often happens with people, it's just, you just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that was 2005.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, that was 2005. And for many, many years, while I was all doing my corporate hotshot stuff during the day, I was doing this secret New Age stuff, on the nights and weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And never would have admitted it to my corporate clients, and didn't really want my New Age people to know that I was working, in
Corporate.
this kind of soulless corporate place.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of how, we catch up to the story we started with, where after 10 years in corporate, with this happening kind of on the sidelines, and me feeling like maybe I am meant to have some kind of spiritual impact on people. Obviously, it can't be a Christian one, so it must be this thing. It must be life coaching, kind of, whatever kind of coaching. And so that's when I went into my business finally in 2017. I married the two. I married my corporate expertise of sales and marketing, my New Age energetics, the metaphysics of things, and tapping, getting into and doing all of that stuff. And I married the two. And I somehow was just able to articulate it in a way that people just like, boom, I get it. And my business took off. But the problem is that I was channeling, and I know how that feels, because I don't do it anymore. And it's a very clear difference. When I get onto a live stream, that energy is not there. And I know that even though I was looking light and speaking about the light and thinking that I was working in the light, it wasn't, because nothing changed. Things just got darker. And that's really how I believe Satan works. He gives you a little taste of poison, really. And if you don't recoil, like you recoiled, right? I didn't. I was like, well, if it doesn't kill me, unfortunately, I have that streak in me where I'm fascinated with the darkness. It's terrible. It's not okay. I don't like it. I really don't. But there's something there that causes me to be so, fascinated with how we get lost. And how we get lost with the best of intentions, Well,
maybe that's part of your gift, is the fact that you can kind of be in that dark place, find your way out, and you can actually attest to, this is what it feels like, and this is what happened. And that maybe that's your gift, that when people say they're feeling a certain way, you can say, well, I know exactly what that is. That's what I felt.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm right now in a place where I'm really trying to, like you said in the introduction, I have totally burned my business to the ground. I mean, I burned down a multi-million-dollar brand that was at the top of, not the top of the top, not even close, but it was up there in terms of the spiritual coaching brands. And I burned it down. And
because I will say, I even, when I had asked you to do this, and you had said that you would, I went back and looked at, I think it was I don't remember if it was your Facebook. I guess it was your Facebook, and it has a couple of links on there, but there's nothing there. They don't link to anything. And I thought, okay, so let's go to the source here.
Yeah. I'm rebuilding from the ground up. You know,
Yeah.
I spent 5 hours, literally 5 hours straight, deleting every post and every picture from middle of last year, even to the end of last year, all the way back to 2017. It's
Mm-hmm.
all gone.
So how did that feel when you were doing that?
Horrible. I was shocked. I mean, you know, I was shocked. I was just appalled at the things I was saying. Um, which, you know, saying things like the dark is the newest, lightest light, that's demonic. That's demonic. The dark is dark and it is of the devil, and the light. But I had this way, this very clever way of kind of turning a phrase to make what should never be palatable fascinating to
Mm-hmm.
people. And they binged my stuff. I mean, I would have people tell me they literally binged hours and hours and hours of my material because it was so fascinating and compelling and scintillating and really blasphemous. So it was very disturbing to go back and read it and to see my pictures. I mean, you probably had left by this point, but there's a picture of me. I did a photo shoot and it's kind of camera's kind of down. So it's kind of looking at me up, you know, kind of like this
Mm-hmm.
from kind of the ground level. So I look really kind of tall and I have black wings and smoke around my head.
Holy moly. No, I didn't see that.
And I'm like, you know, and I'm looking at this like, it's hard to be more obvious. It would be difficult to make it more obviously demonic. I mean, I suppose, you know, if I put horns on my head, but I mean, come on, like, how did I not see this? How did so many other people? I mean, you saw it, but lots of people didn't. And if you look online, I just did a post on this a couple days ago. There's this Magdalene tarot deck that so perfectly depicts the way that the devil disguises himself but shows himself. And
Mm-hmm.
images are the easiest. Words are harder. Images are super easy. The outside of the deck is beautiful and light, and it's got roses, and it's like kind of red and gold and white, and it's beautiful. But the one picture of the card that they show in the kind of promotional thing is this woman with black eyes, like super heavy dark. You can't even see her eyes. It's like holes for eyes. And this really hard look on her face and all that's, and I'm like, that's it. That's how it looks. It's so obvious, but it's not obvious because we think, well, but it's light, but it's not dark because it's light, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And same with me, like people would get onto my live streams and kind of have this weird, uncomfortable feeling, but I'm not, my voice is pleasant. You know, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, I'm not screaming at people, I'm not telling them they suck. I'm entertaining. So I think for a lot of people, it's like their brain kind of breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, how can this be bad?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the way I'm being right now is exactly how I was. So I think a lot of people were just like, but I mean, look at her. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. So
very
what do you
dangerous.
think how is your business? I know it's different now. So what are you doing now in your business that you are proud to talk about?
Good question. So I'm really still figuring that out. But
Mm-hmm.
what I'm landing on is helping people do what I have done. So I have successfully relaunched my business. And I'm working with clients and I'm building out my book of business and all of that. And mostly with people who are ex New Agers who had a business that they had to walk away from, or that they know they can't lead in the same way. I mean, if you're from New Age and you give your life to Christ, it's brand burning time,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so several of them are in that category. Others are just believers who have not been in New Age and want help with their marketing and their sales and their branding and all of that. So it's similar, but totally different. I won't work with New Agers. I've had some come to me, and I have a very serious application process. And if the person is a New Age business, I won't work with them.
So what do you do differently with a business that is Christian based versus one that is New Age based? How do you go about it? Is there something majorly different that you do with these people?
Oh, well, yes. I mean,
Okay.
I essentially, so shadow alchemy is the modality that I invented that became super popular and just kind of spread literally all over the globe. That was my kind of core modality. And I essentially taught people how to alchemize their shadow into light. So take any energetic barrier that they had to success and money and visibility, and literally alchemize it into light, except that it was the false light. And when they did that through this modality, literally just money would come, clients would come, speaking opportunities, book deals, crazy stuff. I don't teach that anymore because it's not up to us to appropriate what is only God's to give us. So I don't do that. I teach them more of the business strategy, and I also teach them what I call spiritual warfare. So the shadow alchemy modality is based on an archetype map that was not created by me. I learned it actually from Carolyn Mace, who really took it from Jung. And what I discovered when I was reviewing all of my material and basically deleting 99.99% of it was that this map is actually, one of my clients calls it the enemy map. It is the perfect map to Satan's way that he sabotages us. And so now I use that as a discernment tool for my clients. And I take them through this process of showing them exactly the cunning ways that Satan gets into our minds and our psyches and causes us, we make 35,000 decisions a day. 35,000.
Yeah.
And how many of those are made under the influence, the deceptive influence of the devil? You're not smart enough. It's not time. Don't do it yet. You don't know enough. You need more information. You need more training. What is everybody else doing? Maybe you should stop and wait. Do you have a plan? Do you see the end? This seems kind of risky. I don't know if you can manage this. I mean, I could go on and on.
Right.
These are voices, and they come in 4 specific flavors. Only 4. There's really only 4 voices inside of us that want to deceive us and have us, and that we are so easily fall prey to. So now I teach them that as an essentially a tool of discernment that they can use in their own lives and businesses, so that they don't fall prey to sabotage in their business, and that they can use with their own clients for the same reason. And then I teach them, sales and marketing. I get a really clear sense of what their real genius is and how they have not been speaking about it powerfully, how they're speaking about it to the wrong people, trying to serve the wrong people, all of that kind of business strategy stuff I still do. That's all exactly the same. The way that they get over the barriers to success is totally different now. I teach them how to hear the devil's voice. I teach them as much discernment as I can. And then I just leave them to prayer. If they're struggling, I just say, because I don't know what God has in store for them.
Mm-hmm.
God may have a season of struggle, kind of like what you were saying, right? I put you into the hole,
Yeah.
for a reason.
Yeah.
So if they're struggling, maybe they're supposed to struggle. And this is one of the biggest challenges that I've had coming back in, because before, if you're struggling, that's unnatural.
Mm-hmm. Let's fix it.
Struggle is unnatural. We're not meant to struggle. We're wired to thrive. That's what I taught.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I taught. We are wired for magic, and thriving is in our bones, or something. We are wired to thrive, and genius is in our bones, something like that. And so if you're struggling, it just means you're in shadow somewhere in your life. You discover where the shadow is, you alchemize it into light, boom. That is not, I don't, you know, it's like my husband says, I can't receive God's mail for you, like, you got to get on your knees and pray about removing this barrier or this fear of being visible and speaking your disruptive message, or getting rejected on sales calls. I can help you with the strategy, but you got to go to God for the courage. You got to go to God for the discernment. You have to go to God for, the faith.
Right. Well, I'm a firm believer that if we were to be able to, let's say, we're in the hole, going back to that, and we were able to artificially get out of it, then that just means that there's going to be another hole waiting across the road, because you didn't learn and figure out what you needed to change inside while you were in there, which was your purpose for being there. So you're just going to fall in another hole. And if you artificially get out of it, you're going to fall in another hole. And it's just going to keep happening, except the holes are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you hit the rock bottom. And it's like, okay, I got to figure this out. And then you start learning what you need to learn. And then that's when things are a little bit smoother, but it doesn't mean you're never going to have another hole, so to speak, because we're constantly learning and growing and becoming. And it's just, it's not the same, but it's like people, most of the people who win the lottery, it's like they've probably been praying forever that, if I just win the lottery, I'd be happy. Well, they get the money, and not only are they not happy, they end up throwing it away, losing it, whatever happens. And most of them end up worse off than they were before they won the lottery. And so I think that's what happens to us if we don't learn those lessons where we've fallen in the hole, in order to grow, because we can't handle what's coming if we don't grow in these ways.
Yep. I used to call it the dark angel. That's what I used to call these moments of, I used to talk about it like there's the dark angel on this side of the door of the threshold, and there's a light angel on the other side. I don't know how I would reframe these now. This is part of the challenge, is like all of my concepts have to be complete.
It sounds like they're valid tools. It's just they're worded in a way that no longer is congruent with who you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Or I mean, not to me, I would say no longer true. They might be valid tools, and they might be beautiful ways of explaining something, but they're like wrong, So, but the point being, when we approach an up level, when we approach the next level of our really what it is our stepping into a greater level of power, God-given power, God ordained power that we are meant to use from him and use according to his will. We're tested. And the closer you get to that threshold, the stronger and more difficult the tests. And I believe the reason is because we are being shown what the next level looks and feels like. And if we can't handle that trial that stands on this side of the threshold, we don't actually want to walk through. We shouldn't want to walk through, because the bigger the bigger level of power that we're working with comes with a lot more responsibility, backlash, fear, courage, risk, all kinds of things. And so those trials, they seem to be our nemesis, but they're actually there to let us know how ready we are to deal with the greater bestowing of power that we're about to step into. So the worst thing to do, and I see this a lot in people, is they get right to the doorway, and that's when all the troubles happen, and they're like, I must not be meant to walk through the doorway, and they turn and they go the other way.
Yeah, that's not where I'm supposed to be. Let me reroute. Yes. I agree, but I will be honest, there are times when you get to that place, it gets so uncomfortable and sometimes it's like it lasts for a little while. So you start thinking, well, am I being crazy to keep on working with this? Maybe this is the sign that I'm supposed to go another way. And so it takes a lot of strength and a lot of, I guess, being able to go through the portal to just through the door. And because it's funny, it was like, there was a saying I heard a long time ago, and it's like, the old saying that when God closes a door, he opens a window or another door, whatever it is. Well, I heard another said that just because he opens the door for you to go through doesn't mean it's not hell in the hallway. And so, I try to keep that in mind when it feels like everything's going wrong. It's like, okay, let me focus here. Let me see, what is it I'm supposed to be learning from this right now? Instead of going to that place of woe's me, how could it be this bad? How could this happen? How could that happen? So I've learned to at least turn it around and say, what's the lesson here that's going to help me to go where I want to be or where I'm supposed to go in my life? What is the lesson? And I think that's where a lot of us end up walking away, is because instead of looking at what we could learn so we can keep growing, it is, we look at it as just to walk away.
I think, so why me? I was talking about that archetype map. Why me is the victim. Why me? Why me? And one of the ways that's very easy, I shouldn't say easy, simple but not easy, powerful but not, is to just change the tone from why me to why me. What might be happening in me, or what might it be about me that I'm going through this that's meant to be of service to other people on the other side? It can actually become part of your understanding of your story, of your why, of your purpose, of your mission. If you can look at it not from the why me God, but from why me. It reminds me of Moses. My favorite story of being called ever. He's a stutterer. He stutters, and his brother is an eloquent speaker. And God calls Moses to go talk to 600,000 Israelites, who are in slavery in Egypt, and to go talk to the Pharaoh. And Moses literally says, "Pardon your servant, Lord, please pick somebody else." I love it. I love it. And so in that case, if we're like, why me? What if the other question is, okay, so why me? Why me? Because now other people can understand that God picks imperfect people to carry his message. God picks imperfect messengers to carry his message because he wants to show, that's how he shows his glory. That's how he works through, that's how he uses our imperfection. So that's just an example of how I would help somebody use that kind of, the devil wanting us to say, why me, which stops us in our tracks. There's nowhere you can go. You're dead in the water.
Right. Right.
But to turn it into a question that has movement in it, curiosity, courage, humility, surrender, you know.
Yes, definitely. So we're getting close to time on here. So what is the one thing that you would like to leave all the listeners with about your journey, your new message? And I will be putting the links. I still need you to share those with me, the actual links to, if you have any social media that you want shared, or a website or anything like that. But tell people how they can get in touch with you as well. And then I will be sharing the stuff in the bio and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I have a Facebook group right now that it's called One Thing. It's going to be rebranded to Called by Grace, and that's really the place where I am working with women who are either seriously questioning New Age and really feeling called by grace to come back to God, or have already done that. They've flipped over, and but both sides they're questioning. You know, what is true? What does the Bible really mean? And I am not equipped to answer that question. So I bring in people that have been in the faith and in the word a long time who are equipped to answer those questions. And so right now I'm creating, I haven't launched it yet, but I'm creating a 12-month experience for women to walk this journey of essentially stepping into their new personal identity in Christ and their new business identity in Christ. So that is, what else? What was your other question? What message?
What would you want them to take away from your story today, and what you're rebranding and what you're doing now? What is the main thing you would like them to gather from that?
Well, just that if they are feeling called, because there is a movement happening, more and more of us are leaving New Age and turning to Christ. It is incredible. The Holy Spirit is just sweeping through and gathering his children back to him. And so if you are on either side of that decision, number one, I would say, accept the call. No matter how scary, no matter how unreasonable, no matter how irritating, accept the call, number one. And if you want help doing that, if you want guidance in all the different ways, deprogramming your life, deprogramming your business, and then if you feel called to be a transformational coach, stepping back into a business where God is at the center, and where your faith is grounded in the truth and not in the newest place where I think Satan is operating, which is New Age Christianity. And there's a lot of churches out there who have been infiltrated with that. So if you want guidance and a community and support, then that's what I'm here to do. That is my new mission, and I would be honored to help with that journey.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, thank you again so much for being here today. This has just been enlightening, I will say. And I want to tell the listeners as well, if you want to reach out to me, I will be having the links to my my YouTube channel, and all my social media will be in the comments as well. And if you feel like you want to reach out, please do. I would be more than happy to talk to you. So with that said, please, please, please reach out to Lorna, reach out to me, and don't feel like you have to journey on this alone.
Amen.
Yes. So be blessed, and we will see you soon.